Greetings. My name is Sherman Woodard, Director of Student Services at Ben Davis High School. The person I'm choosing to talk about for this Black History Month is Dr. George Washington Carver. Um, it's a name that frequently, maybe not even frequently, that is generally heard just during Black History Month now. And as I talk to young people over the years, I'm finding out that people know less and less about him. Maybe 5 to 10 years ago, when I talk about Brother George Washington Carver, young people would say, "Oh, isn't that the guy that invented peanut butter?" And no, he didn't invent peanut butter. Uh, but I remember learning about George Washington Carver and also feeling like that my memories of him were trivialized. That he did something with the peanut or whatnot. But his true greatness was not communicated to me in my formal education, public education. And the truth about him now remains mystical, if you will. But Brother George Washington was born sometime around 1860, 1862. Actual date of his birth is unknown, as he was born into slavery. I think around 65 was when he was emancipated. Uh, his slave owners did adopt him or took him in and parented him um, after the Emancipation Proclamation. At the age of 12 or 13, he sought education. Um, he learned to read and write. Then I think around 20 or so, he applied to college. Uh, First school he was accepted into, once he got there and they realized he was a black man, he was not allowed to attend. He did end up getting an education in what's now known at Iowa State. Uh, got a degree in agriculture and botany, uh, and eventually got his master's degree from Iowa State and became the first black person to be a professor. Um, but depending on your perspective, greatly formulate your views about George Washington Carver. I call him Dr. Washington Carver, but he actually was not. He never received his doctorate. His formal education stopped with a master's at Iowa State. He went on to Booker T. Washington, brought him aboard at Tuskegee, and he went on running the agriculture science department at Tuskegee. Very famous man, black man of his time. And what he done and what he is a agricultural genius. He, depending on who you read, some would say saved the South's agriculture. The South land had been depleted from all the cotton. The cotton was all the was planting, shipping out, greatly profiting off of, but it was depleting the soil. It was no longer fertile ground, and what Dr. Carver, Washington informed farmers of the South is if they plant legumes, peanuts, and soybeans, that rejuvenated the soil, put nitrogen. And I'm not a botanist, but I do know that. I've read that it put nitrogen in, it rejuvenated the soil. When he first started his campaign, peanut was not a major crop, but by his death, it was the sixth major crop produced in the South. And people who used his techniques came back to him and said, now I have all these peanuts or all these legumes, all these sweet potatoes, and it's not really a market for it. Mr. Carver, what should we do now? And then he came with over 300 inventions using the peanut, from dyes to soy, milk. Like I said, over 300 inventions that could be utilized from the peanut and other legumes. So I like to consider him a multi-genius that our history books, I was looking through a recent history book and I didn't even see the name George Washington Carver in the book. And so when we talk about geniuses and some of our greatest minds, we have to put Brother George Washington Carver on that list for the simple fact of how the times needed someone to rejuvenate our crop, our agriculture, our land, and his studies revolutionized how we plant. I mean, we learn about crop rotation, we learn about nitrogen and things in the soil now, but that was the ingeniousness that he brought to the table. Like I said, then he wasn't wasteful. Then he went back to the lab and said, "Hey, we can do all these things with peanut, with the legumes, with sweet potatoes. We can create all these inventions." Now, none of his inventions ever made it uh, humongously, but this is the way his mind worked. Another reason I chose uh, George Washington Carver because of his fame in the white community. White people loved George Washington Carver partly because he was a really soft-spoken man. He was deeply religious and really wasn't a rebel rouser. Who went with the flow. Um, wasn't a politically active brother of the time. But I'd like to submit Dr. George Washington Carver to this Black History Program Month and say that he significantly contributed to the agricultural, science, botany, to academia for the years he spent with Booker T. Washington at Tuskegee, for the generations of students that he introduced to the field of agriculture and botany, and where I see that there had been a moving away from specifically African Americans from farming, from agriculture, but yet that was where he found his greatest joy and provided his greatest services to mankind. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed it a little bit. Hopefully it encouraged you to go look up some. And it's like I said, it's interesting that looks like that he's not in the current history books. That if you Google him, you would see some saying that he was an overrated scientist, some saying that he was possibly the greatest scientist that lived. But I believe all information is partial and political. So you read what you can and learn to add to your repertoire of knowledge on Brother George Washington Carver. Thank you.